Good day, everyone. I'm Edna Doble the First, a second-year BSBA student. I'm one of the students of Group Sub 1 Banking and Financial Institution under Mrs. Dulce L. Roa LPT. In this Module 4, we will be discussing the importance of BSB in supervising and regulating banks and other financial institutions and understood how banks are regulated. Let's start in Lesson 7. And this is all about the rules and functions of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. One of the three pillars of central banking is effective supervision and regulation. The other two pillars are maintenance of price stability and maintenance of an effective payments and settlement system. The BSB acts as supervisor and regulators of the following institutions: banks, subsidiaries and affiliates of banks, quasi-banks, subsidiaries and affiliates of quasi-banks engaged in allied activities, trust entities, non-stock savings and loans associations, pawn shops, and offshore banking units or OBUS. According to the level of capitalization and authorized banking functions and activities, banks are classified into universal banks, commercial banks, thrift banks, rural banks, cooperative banks, Islamic banks, and other banks. So let's start with the first rule, and it's all about the issuance of rules. The BSB sets policy directions and issues instructions to banks and other supervised institutions through memorandums and circulars. All issuances are pursuant to and consist with the General Banking Law of 2000, the new Central Bank Act, and the other applicable laws. Issuances cover the whole range of banking activities from organization, capitalization, equity investments, compositions of board of directors, qualification and or disqualifications of officers and directors, and operations. In regards with operation, this includes self-dealing transactions, lending limits, reserve requirements, mergers and consolidations, branching, disclosures, provisions of losses and write-offs, acquisitions of real estates, other banking services. The second one is examination and investigation. The BSB conduct regular examination and special examinations when circumstances warrant. Regular examinations are conducted as specified intervals, at least once a year, but in no case shall the present examination be done within 2 months for the last examination. And by a vote of at least 5 members of Monetary Board, a special examination may be conducted anytime. As insurer of bank deposits, the Philippine Deposit and Insurance Commission has given concurrent authority to examine banks. During the exam of supervised institution, BSB checks the institution's compliance with the laws, rules, and regulations. BSB also assesses capital adequacy, asset quality, management quality, earnings, liquidity, sensitivity to market risk. The components is rated from 1 to 5. 5 is the highest. A component rating of 3 is considered satisfactory. The less than satisfactory rating indicates that the institution requires special attention. A composite rating of 2 triggers prompt corrective action. And of course, during the exam, BSB checks for possible unsafe and unsound banking activities. For example, a bank whose adjusted capitalization have fallen below the required minimum must commit to immediate inject capital to make up for the shortfall. The third one is prompt corrective action. Banks with CAMELS rating below 3 falls into this PCA framework. A bank under PCA is obligated to sign a time-bound memorandum of understanding with BSB wherein the bank commits to address the deficiencies noted in the examination. The fourth one is resolution. Receivership is the first step in the resolution. The bank is immediately prohibited to engage in banking activities anywhere in the Philippines. The Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation takes over and pays the insured depositors. It determines whether it is still possible to allow the bank to resume operation with safety to its depositors. Resumption of operation is still possible with the entry of a white knight. However, should reopening prove to be impossible, the PDIC recommends to the Monetary Board the liquidation of the bank. This is the second and the final step of the resolution process. At that point, the residual assets of the bank are then disposed of, and then proceeds are paid pro rata to the preferred creditors and eventually the uninsured depositors. To emphasize, the Philippine banking system is very strong and stable. With the exemption of few which are closely watched by the Bangko Sentral, Philippine banks are adequately capitalized, well-managed, profitable, and are efficiently performing their roles as mobilizer and lenders of funds, which fuel the growth of our economy. As supervisor and regulator, BSBA regularly monitors and examines the operations of banks as well as non-banks which performing quasi-banking functions. Quasi-banks are non-bank entities engaged in the borrowing of funds from more than 19 lenders through the issuance, endorsements, or assignment with risk score or acceptance of deposits substitute for purpose of relending or purchasing of receivables and obligations. In such a case, the non-bank fall under the supervision of the Bangko Sentral. Otherwise, the non-bank is supervised by either the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Insurance Commission. Also, include under the Bangko Sentral's supervisions are trust entities, pawn shops, and non-stock savings and loan associations. The Bangko Sentral sees to it that these supervised institutions faithfully and fully comply with banking rules and regulations. With a bank, despite proper supervision, encounters financial troubles, the Bangko Sentral has the option to assign a conservator to temporarily manage the bank's operation until it recovers. This option, however, has rarely been used. In fact, it was used only twice in the past. More often, the Bangko Sentral employs the Prompt Corrective Action or PCA. Under the PCA setup, the supervised bank is required to enter an agreement through the execution of a Memorandum of Understanding with the Bangko Sentral, where the bank commits itself to adopt a plan to improve its capital position, business operation, and corporate governance. Such plan is time-bound, and the bank shall submit periodic progress report to the Bangko Sentral. Some banks eventually graduate or exit from PCA, others failed, eventually leading to their closure. When the Central Monetary Authority's evaluation shows that the bank cannot restore to its healthy condition, the Bangko Sentral stopped the bank for further operation. The bank is placed under receivership. This is to prevent the bank from incurring further losses to prejudice of its depositors and creditors. The Bangko Sentral Charter enumerates instances when a bank may be replaced under receivership, and these are the following. When the bank is unable to pay its liabilities as they become due in the ordinary course of business. Number 2, when the bank has insufficient realizable assets to meet its liabilities. 3, when the bank cannot continue its business without involving probable losses to its depositors or creditors. 4, when the bank has willfully violated a final cease and desist orders involving acts or transactions which amount to fraud or a dissipation of the assets of the bank. Any of these grounds would be sufficient to justify blank closure. The Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation is appointed as a receiver of the closed banks. Within a period not exceeding 90 days from closure of a bank, the PDIC determines whether or not the bank in question can be allowed to reopen. Reopening can be made possible by a white knight or a new group of investors which decide to take over the closed bank and infuse the necessary capital to enable the bank to operate safely. If reopening the bank is no longer feasible, the PDIC recommends that the bank will place under liquidation. PDIC pays the insured deposit up to 500,000 pesos per depositor. At the same time, PDIC proceeds to dispose of the bank's assets. The residual processed are paid pro rata to unpaid depositors and other creditors of the closed bank. So, that's it. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day. Goodbye!